The Quest to Understand States of Mind. By now, the meeting's final hour, the table in front of the presenters lay littered with the detritus of the week's work. Books and notebooks, the disassembled plastic model of the brain, Palm Pilots and cameras, AV equipment, water bottles. I started our final discussion by asking the Dalai Lama, "In terms of what has been presented to you, is there some kind of research that you think particularly useful?" After a long pause, the Dalai Lama began by tying Richie's earlier presentation on the neurology of destructive emotions to the data he had just presented. When Richie was making his presentation and examined what kind of antidotes could be applied to deal with negative emotions, I felt that antidote was already an evaluative, judgmental term. It may be possible to frame what we are interested in such a way that we simply examine what mental states oppose or counter others, similar to the terminology used to describe the relationship between the left prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. Let's take one example of a deflated or listless emotional state. You can't just say uniformly that a deflated state of emotion is a negative one or a destructive one, because it all depends on the particular circumstances. If one is feeling very haughty with an inflated sense of self-esteem, then at that time it would be good to deflate one's mental state. On the other hand, if at times one feels very low self-esteem or maybe falls into depression, at that time a deflated state would not be helpful. So you can't say uniformly that it's one or the other. Rather, you would have to see in context where it is useful. Likewise, you could look at different types of emotional states and try to evaluate them by context as well as in terms of what state is diametrically opposed to them. Comparing this to matter, it would be like identifying an acid or a base. Neither is positive or negative, but they are incompatible and will neutralize each other. Now the Dalai Lama turned to a very different topic. Another interesting point is that when one is dreaming, normally one's sensory faculties have gone dormant, so you don't hear or see. On the other hand, if a person is dreaming and you shout at them, then they do hear you. They wake up. This would seem to imply that the grosser level of sensory awareness is dormant, but there must be some subtle level of awareness that enables you to be aroused when somebody shouts at you. That would be an interesting area to study. Then he wondered, when you're experiencing dream imagery, exactly what part of the brain is being activated? And how does this relate to the earlier discussion of which part of the brain is activated in straight perceptual awareness as opposed to mental conceptual cognition?